Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Wednesday, June 5th, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Ukraine claims strike inside Russia using U.S. weapons. So on Tuesday, a member of Ukraine's parliament told the New York Times that Ukraine had launched strikes on Russian territory using U.S.-provided HIMARS rocket systems after President Biden lifted restrictions on Kiev's use of the weapons. So Yehor Chernev, he's the deputy chairman of the Ukrainian Parliament's Committee on National Security, Defense, and Intelligence. He claimed the strikes destroyed S-300 and S-400 missile systems about 20 miles inside Russia's Belgorod Oblast. And Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Iryna Vereshchuk, she also hinted that Ukraine hit Russian territory with Western-provided weapons. In a now deleted post on Telegram, she shared a picture of a burning S-300 system and said, quote, "It's burning well. This is a Russian S-300 on Russian territory, the first days after permission to use Western weapons on the enemy's territory," end quote. And you can see the picture there that she says shows a S-300 burning inside Russia. And I know there was some Russian military bloggers were talking about this on Telegram and posting pictures as well. So President Biden gave Ukraine the green light to hit Russian territory with U.S.-provided missiles last week. A huge escalation in the proxy war, something we've been warning about and talking about for quite a bit now. And, you know, if these claims are true, which we haven't seen confirmation from the Ukrainian military or the Russian side, but again, it seems like there's a good chance that this has happened. And of course, this risks a major escalation a major response from Russia, I should say, despite Stoltenberg and other U.S. and Western officials downplaying the risk of escalation. We've seen Russia escalate its war directly in response to strikes on its territory. Now we have NATO missiles being used, and if they are using, if this was a strike with U.S. HIMARS missiles, that means that they need U.S. support, U.S. intelligence for the targeting data. So that would mean this is a strike that the U.S. directly supported, not just by giving them the weapons, but also the intelligence to carry it out. So again, just a whole nother level of escalation here. All right, so the next one here, NATO is developing land corridors to rush U.S. troops to the front lines. So the Telegraph reported on Tuesday that NATO is developing multiple land corridors to rush U.S. troops and armored vehicles to the front lines of a potential future ground war with Russia in Eastern Europe. So current NATO plans involve U.S. troops landing in U.S. ports. Sorry, not U.S. ports. In ports in the Netherlands and then transporting through Germany to Poland, but the alliance is looking to expand the potential routes for U.S. troops to reach the borders of Russia and Ukraine. Officials told the Telegraph that they want U.S. troops to be able to travel through 5 different corridors. The first one is that one through the Netherlands, then Germany to reach Poland. The second one would be landing in Italy to travel through Slovenia and Slovakia to reach Hungary, which borders Ukraine, then landing in Greece to travel through, this is the third corridor, travel through Bulgaria to reach Romania. And then the fourth is Turkey through Bulgaria to reach Romania. And then the fifth is Norway, traveling through Sweden to reach Finland, which is one of the newer NATO members that shares a very expansive border with Russia. And the U.S. is going to be sending troops to Finland now. They have access to their military bases. So the Telegraph report said that under the NATO plan, U.S. troops and vehicles traveling through these countries would not be restricted by local laws. So they could travel quickly, basically, so there wouldn't be any holdup. And the report mentioned that France had complained that, bureaucratic things held up French tanks when they were deploying to Romania. So this is part of, starting in 2023, NATO started again drawing up war plans for war with Russia. First time that they drew up these plans since the Cold War. And it really just goes to show the sad state of relations between Russia and NATO. And it also goes to show, they're preparing for a potential war with Russia, like a direct war. And this would be, in this case, the preparation is if Russia invades NATO. That's the scenario that they're preparing for here. But of course, they could also be, we don't know if they're preparing for fighting in Ukraine. I mean, you have, it doesn't seem to be the consensus of NATO, but you have France talking about and preparing to send troops for training now. But what Macron's been talking about lately, it sounds like he's been talking about not just sending troops for training, but also sending ground troops to fight Russia. And so they're planning this despite the obvious risk of any sort of ground war with Russia quickly turning nuclear. Instead of seeking diplomacy with Russia to cool tensions, they're just escalating the proxy war and planning and drawing up all these war plans. So very concerning. And I think this might mean that there are people in NATO, there are people in the U.S. who think that they could fight like a limited war with Russia and that it wouldn't just immediately turn into a nuclear war, which is a very scary thought. All right, so the next one here, Kremlin warns Western troops in Ukraine will be targeted. So the Kremlin warned on Tuesday that there will be no immunity from Russian strikes for Western troops deployed to Ukraine to train Ukrainian forces. And this warning comes as France is planning a deployment to Ukraine. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, he made these comments in response to an op-ed in the Washington Post written by Lee Hochstader. And he wrote that Putin might see hitting French troops as a way. He basically said that there's a chance if France sends these troops to Ukraine, they might get hit by Russia. And Peskov said in response, when asked about this op-ed, quote, "The fact is that any instructors who are involved in training the military of the Ukrainian regime do not have any immunity, and it doesn't matter whether they are French or not," end quote. So France could announce these plans this week. Reuters reported that Zelensky, he's visiting France for D-Day, which is June 6th, for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Russia's not invited, even though obviously the Soviet Union was an ally of France and the U.S. During World War II. But the plan apparently is for Zelensky to meet with Macron on June 7th, the day after the D-Day commemoration, and discuss this plan. And there's something about the symbolism there, a big event for a World War II battle, and then preparing for something that could bring about the next World War. So it's just really crazy. And Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, he also had a warning for the French on Tuesday. One thing that all this talk about France sending troops to Ukraine has highlighted the fact that there are a small number of NATO troops inside Ukraine. Some of them are probably training Ukrainian soldiers. So Lavrov said, quote, "As for the issue of French instructors, I have grounds to think that there are quite a few specific facts that they are already working in Ukraine, regardless of whether they are considered to be servicemen from the French armed forces or simply mercenaries. They represent a legitimate target of our armed forces," end quote. So we'll see if France listens to any of these warnings or if they just go ahead with this plan. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. and Israel sign a $3 billion F-35 deal. So the U.S. and Israel on Tuesday signed a deal that will provide Israel with 25 new Lockheed Martin-made F-35 fighter jets, demonstrating staunch U.S. support for Israel amid the slaughter and starvation of Palestinians in Gaza. Israel's defense ministry said the deal is worth $3 billion, and it will be financed by U.S. military aid. So the U.S. is paying for this. The U.S. provides Israel with $3.8 billion in military aid each year, and President Biden recently signed a bill that will give Israel an additional $17 billion. So the new fighter jets will start being delivered to Israel in 2028 and will bring Israel's total fleet of F-35s to 75. So Israel first announced its intention to procure this new fleet of F-35s in the summer of 2023, so almost a year ago. And the U.S. is also working to push forward a separate deal that will give Israel 25 F-15 fighter jets. So Republicans are mad at Biden for his warning about Rafah, that he might cut off certain bomb shipments to Israel. But of course, he hasn't imposed any consequences. The U.S. has essentially signed off on everything that Israel has done in Rafah. And when Biden made that warning, he also said that, pledged long-term military support for Israel. And another thing that we saw his officials in his administration say was that Israel is going to get every penny of that $17 billion, that new $17 billion in military aid. So this whole time, this isn't really a surprise, but it goes to show how there is no, real change to the U.S. support for Israel. Big $3 billion deal to give them more jets that they could use to drop more bombs on Gaza, or Lebanon, Syria, wherever else they decide to bomb. All right, so the next one here, Biden suggests that Netanyahu is prolonging the Gaza war to stay in power. So President Biden has said that people have every reason to believe Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is prolonging the Israeli onslaught in Gaza for his own political survival. The president made the comments in an interview with Time magazine. I'll just read the question and then read his exact response. So he was asked, quote, "Some in Israel have suggested that Netanyahu is prolonging the war for his own political self-preservation. Do you believe that?" End quote. And Biden replied, quote, "I'm not going to comment on that. There is every reason for people to draw that conclusion." End quote. So that sounded like a comment after he said he wasn't going to comment. And polling has shown that the majority of Israelis want Netanyahu to resign, or they want new elections once the war on Gaza is over. So any pause in Israeli military operations would increase the domestic pressure on him, of course. And Biden's comments in this interview reflect reports that we've seen. There was one in February from NBC News that said the president privately expressed that Netanyahu wants to drag things out so he can remain in power. And that's all the way back in February. So despite holding that view of Netanyahu, Biden has continued to provide military aid and diplomatic support for Netanyahu's genocidal campaign in Gaza. If he really thinks that, how bad does that make the fact that he just continues to support this thing and basically still give Netanyahu everything he wants? And there's other reports have said that U.S. officials believe Netanyahu might view a wider regional war or war in Lebanon as key to his political survival. Provoking a major war is something that he might want to do. But the U.S. continues to back Israel, and they supported Israel even, after they bombed the Iranian consulate in Damascus, which was just a huge provocation that risked huge escalation. And the U.S. still, they defended Israel from the repercussions for that attack by intercepting Iranian missiles and drones. So, you see them say these things, but doesn't it just make it that much worse that they're still supporting this, that they acknowledge these things? All right, so the next one here, House votes to sanction the ICC for a case against Israeli leaders. So this article is from Responsible Statecraft by Connor Eccles. In a 247 to 155 vote, the House passed a bill that would impose sanctions on anyone who has assisted the International Criminal Court in its investigation of Israel's conduct in Gaza, a group that could include U.S. allies like Germany and Japan that fund the tribunal. The bill, titled the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act — oh, so clever that the abbreviation for that is ICC — But this bill aims to punish the ICC for its chief prosecutor's recent decision to seek arrest warrants against several leaders from Israel and Hamas, including Netanyahu and Gallant, the Israeli defense minister. More than 40 Democrats joined Republicans to back the proposal, despite opposition from the Biden administration. So the Biden administration has said that it's opposed to this bill. They say that they would support measures against the ICC. Blinken said he was willing to work with Congress on that. But the Biden is saying that this thing goes too far. It is like very sweeping sanctions here. And the sanctions could include bans on entering the U.S. and doing business with American companies or citizens. It's not clear if it's going to be brought to a vote in the Democrat-controlled Senate. But this seems to be like the Republicans putting up this really strong sanctions bill about this ICC thing to show, again, I think we're going to see a lot of this, that the Republicans are just trying to show that they're the real super pro-Israel party, and that everybody, they got to vote for them, so they could get the AIPAC money for the elections coming up. But of course, you have the hardcore Democrats who are very pro-Israel who voted for it as well, which is more than 40 Democrats, so not a insignificant number. But we'll see if the Senate takes it up. But the White House statement, I forget exactly what they said, but it left open room to negotiate something, negotiate sanctions, not as sweeping as these ones. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. is field testing an anti-drone weapon in Gaza. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. The U.S. has deployed a new combat vehicle designed to help Ukraine help Russian drone attacks to Gaza to field test the new weapon. So this is a story from last week. I guess maybe the pier was still intact when this was reported by the Telegraph. Or maybe not. I can't remember when it broke apart exactly. But anyway, I remember seeing a video of this, and I wasn't sure if it was really in Gaza, but the Pentagon has deployed 2 mobile, low, slow, small, unmanned aircraft integrated defeat systems. That's a big name. The abbreviation is MLIDS. They've deployed these to Gaza, and these are weapons designed to down drone swarms. And one of these, and they've been deployed with the so-called humanitarian pier to Gaza, and at least one of these vehicles rolled down the pier and took up station at the edge of the beach in Gaza. And the Telegraph described the operation as a pre-war test. So this is something that they're developing because drone warfare, and not in the sense of like drone strikes from Reaper drones or something like that, drone warfare in the sense of small drones, which what we've seen in Russia and Ukraine. These drone swarms, sending a bunch of these small kamikaze drones. And this is a system that the U.S. is hoping would be effective against that. And they're, sending it. They sent it to Gaza. It's not clear right now if it's at the beach at the moment, with most of the pier is being repaired. But they did send it. And it consists, so this weapon, it has a 30 millimeter chain gun mounted on top of multiple mine resistant vehicles that target small drones. And then it has some kind of electronic warfare capabilities as well. All right, so the next one here, at least 15 killed in Israeli attack on central Gaza refugee camps. So this article is from Al Jazeera, just about some of the violence in Gaza on Tuesday. At least 15 people have been killed in Israeli ground and air attacks on the Burej and Maghazi refugee camps in central Gaza, a Palestinian health official has said. And they said there was dozens of injuries as well. And so central Gaza, things have ramped up pretty good as well. If the aggression on the areas in central Gaza does not come to a halt, the number of those killed is expected to quickly rise. The Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital is the only medical facility currently offering services to more than 1 million people in the area. The facility does not have the capacity for more patients, adding that, this official warned, adding that the hospital is already overflowing with wounded people, many of whom are being treated on the floor. An attack on another house in the neighboring Maghazi refugee camp killed 2 people, according to officials at the Al-Aqsa hospital. So, again, Israeli military operations strikes in Gaza really ramped up across the whole strip in the north, central, and southern parts of it. All right, so the next one here, closure of Gaza route out leaves boy with no treatment for cancer. So this is an article from Reuters about a boy, Siraj Yassin, who's 10 years old, and he has leukemia, and he can't have treatment for it. There's no place that can treat him, and I believe he was supposed to leave Gaza. I'll just read the article. So Siraj Yassin, 10, is rolled into the overcrowded Gaza hospital ward in his wheelchair, his light green T-shirt dwarfing his skinny frame since the leukemia in his blood wrecked his immune system, sapped his strength, and left him unable to walk. Chemotherapy would help him, his doctors say, but he can't get it here in Gaza, and he can't get out of the enclave for treatment now that Israeli forces have shut the only exit through the Rafah crossing into Egypt. So the boy said, this is a quote from him, quote, 2 weeks ago, I stopped being able to walk. Every day my condition gets worse and I lose something. My bones hurt and everything hurts. I wish to leave Gaza so I can receive the treatment and be able to play like I used to, end quote. So Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital is one of the only hospitals still functioning in Gaza, where most of the medical system has been destroyed by Israel. So residents flock there for basic treatment. So the only thing that they could do to help seriously ill patients like Siraj, they're saying right for now they can only give him drugs for the pain while they still have them. I know in some places they haven't been able to administer, anesthesia or drugs or things like that. And there are a lot of kids that I went over a story, I think last week, that there were, of multiple children with serious health issues that need to leave Gaza, to be evacuated from Gaza for proper treatment. And they're stuck now, and they've been stuck since the border crossing has been closed. All right, so the next one here, reports suggest that Israel is gearing up for Lebanon war. So this one is from Jason Ditz. Tensions continue to rise on Israel's northern border with Lebanon, and there are reports of Israel's war cabinet discussing a full-scale war against Lebanon. Hezbollah and Israel have been fighting almost daily since October, with nearly constant Israeli airstrikes against southern Lebanon. The U.S. and France have been trying to negotiate a settlement to see attacks stopped by both sides and Hezbollah move back from the Litani River. Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir doesn't want to wait for a deal. Visiting the north today to inspect the damage from rocket fire, Ben-Gvir insisted that Israel's military duty now is to destroy Hezbollah. Britain recently warned Lebanon of the likelihood of an imminent Israeli attack in mid-June and the start of a war whose geographic expansion and duration will not be known. Qatar also spoke up, expressing concern about Israel's intentions toward Lebanon, saying it does not believe Israel wants a ceasefire. Following Ben-Gvir's comments, this seems a realistic take on the situation, at least given the current government. And I know we have seen Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, has said before, if there's a ceasefire in Gaza, we're going to escalate in the north. So maybe if they do agree to that first phase of the deal, the 6-week ceasefire, then there might be a big escalation in southern Lebanon. And then sorry, I just lost my train of thought. There was pretty big Hezbollah rocket attacks on Israel on Tuesday, or maybe it was like Monday night into Tuesday, and there's big fires in northern Israel. And then the war cabinet convened after that. And so, again, there's just a lot of talk lately. There's been a lot of threats for months now from Israeli officials about invading southern Lebanon, but it seems to be heating up a bit. And then there's the question of if Israel can handle, a two-front war like this. They might be looking to get bailed out by the U.S. All right, so the next story here, Ben-Gvir threatens to storm Al-Aqsa during extremist flag march. So this article is from the New Arab, and Israel's extremist national security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has threatened to storm the sacred Al-Aqsa mosque on Wednesday during a provocative flag march through Jerusalem. Israeli settlers are due to celebrate Jerusalem Day, the anniversary of their capture of Palestinian East Jerusalem, during the 1967 Arab-Israeli War on Wednesday. Israeli settlers and extremists mark the event by marching through Palestinian areas of the city while waving Israeli flags in a deliberate provocation. The day is often marked by assaults on Palestinian people and properties, as well as other provocations. Ben-Gvir, who has a history of violent incitement against Palestinians, told Israeli Army radio that the march was planned to pass through the Muslim Quarter and the Damascus Gate in the Old City in East Jerusalem. Around 3,000 Israeli police will provide security. So Ben-Gvir said, quote, "We need to hit them in the most important place for them. Every year, they said that it wasn't appropriate and it wasn't the time. But the opposite is true. If we give ground to them, we get an October 7th, end quote. He continued, quote, "We will march through the Damascus Gate and rise to the Temple Mount, no matter what they think and despite their anger," end quote. So very, very provocative. I'm just going to read another quote. He goes on, quote, "We need to come and say that Temple Mount is ours and Jerusalem is ours. If we see ourselves as the owners of the area, our enemies will respect us," end quote. So the Temple Mount is what they call Al-Aqsa. So this is a very sensitive thing, and you know, things could explode in East Jerusalem, in the West Bank, as a result of a big provocation. During this flag march, it's always very provocative, and you see people chanting, you know, "Death to Arabs" during these things. And, you know, these people have always been considered, you know, on the fringe, but Ben-Gvir is the head of the Israeli police. He's the head of the, you know, the Minister of National Security. So it kind of makes it extra provocative to have such a high-level Israeli official joining things like this. And we'll see if they storm Al-Aqsa Mosque. And remember what Hamas called October 7th, what they called their attack, Al-Aqsa Flood. They said they started planning it in response to Israeli forces storming Al-Aqsa. All right. As you know, that was one of the reasons. Okay, so the next one here, the last story, the U.S. Marine Corps deploys MQ-9 Reaper drones to the Philippines. So U.S. Marine Corps MQ-9A Reaper drones are now operating in the Philippines as the U.S. continues to beef up its military presence in the country. And this was reported by USNI News on Monday. So the Reaper drones, which can be armed with powerful Hellfire missiles, have been operating out of the Philippines since the spring at the request of Manila, as the two nations are increasing intelligence sharing. A spokesperson for the 1 Marine Expeditionary Force told USNI that the Marine Corps, quote, "will employ unarmed MQ-9As to provide reconnaissance and surveillance in support of the development of intelligence sharing between the U.S. and our Philippine allies," end quote. So U.S. Reaper drones have been deployed to support the Philippines in the South China Sea, where tensions are soaring between Manila and Beijing over disputed rocks and reefs in the waters. The U.S. is strongly backing the Philippines in the dispute and has even committed itself to intervene if the situation turns into a shooting war. Whenever there is an incident between Chinese and Philippine boats in the South China Sea, the U.S. takes the opportunity to remind China that the U.S.-Philippine Mutual Defense Treaty applies to attacks on Philippine boats in the disputed waters. According to USNI, U.S. Reaper drones conducted 5 sorties over the South China Sea in March to support overwatch of the Second Thomas Shoal. So Second Thomas Shoal, that's where most of these things go down. It's part of the Spratly Islands. And it is where the Philippines has this ship grounded. It's like a World War II era ship. If you see pictures of it, it's completely rusted. But they use it kind of as a base of operations and to stake their claim to Second Thomas Shoal. And China often, usually now these days, tries to intercept the boats that go to resupply it. So there's been a lot of encounters there. And the U.S. has really been emboldening Marcos, the Philippine president, to push against China in the South China Sea. So we've just seen so many more of these incidents. And this is saying that during some of them, U.S. MQ-9 drones are up there, conducting surveillance. So it just goes to show how involved the U.S. is in this maritime dispute. And it's just this is part of the U.S. military buildup in the Philippines. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints, one from Casey Carlisle, the speech that military recruiters don't want you to hear. One from Ted Snyder, is Biden leading from behind on Ukraine? One from John Perry, when Nicaragua took Germany to court, media put Nicaragua in the dock. One from Caitlin Johnstone, U.S. is discrediting all arguments for why it should lead the world. One from Daphne Golan Agnon, Israelis must wake up to the plight of the Palestinian prisoner. So please go check all of that out. I want to remind everybody, next week, there's going to be full week of shows next week, but on June 14th, which is next Friday, I'm flying to Australia for a 2-week vacation. So this show is going to be taking a little hiatus for 2 weeks. I'm going to be visiting with my wife's family there with our kids. First real vacation in about 4 years, so I am very excited about it. But I'll send you guys over to Kyle Anzalone's show, Conflicts of Interest, if you still want to watch. He puts out a show just about every day, and he has very good analysis of the news and stuff, and he goes over a lot of this stuff at antiwar.com. But just wanted to remind you about that. And it seems like a lot of Australians listen to the show, which is cool. So anyway, you can support this show by telling your friends about antiwar.com. Like, subscribe, share. Lots of you do that, and I really appreciate it. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on X. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.